Yes, I'd love it if we've got time. Alice, Tone, Sam, can you come down? Richard?
Yeah.
Any other cast member who might want to come down, just so you can put a face to it? Alice, I think these men are incredibly brave. They started work with me, believe it or not, in Dartmoor Prison in 1984. And we haven't worked with them all that time, but my God, they've been there when we wanted them.
Right, okay, so I'm not sure how long we've got, but anyway, any questions?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I was wondering, who exactly was your target audience? Because the film seemed a bit complex.
The film is complex, and for me the target audience is whoever wants to see it, quite honestly. Ironically, the people who seem to get the most from it are often very young and people whom we might think of as being stupid or ignorant. They're not. They're just given ignorant stuff. You know, when we've shown it in townships, in prisons, they've got it immediately. I know you're meant to work to target audiences. I've never really done what you're meant to do. I don't know if I'm capable of it. Alice, where's Alice? You got a target audience?
It was a story that needed telling, and if it has any value, it will find its audience.
It took a long time with the telling, hasn't it? How long have you been working on it?
A long time. It was not something the industry was going to finance readily. There was no way that we were going to get an insurance guarantor to insure taking Derek Jacobi and other esteemed actors into a prison environment. And the only way to do it was to buy the equipment and to make it ourselves. And we were supported in that by an extraordinary group of people. People like Derek Jacobi and Richard Clifford, who allowed us to use their names. And people who, at every juncture, when we seemed to have hit a stone wall, came along and said, no, 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 we've got an idea. This is what we can do now. And it just developed a life of its own and essentially carried us along with it, a whole group of people who were utterly fascinated by all the layers of meaning, the complexity, and the universes that it opened in their own experience that they'd never encountered. And for me, I've worked in many genres and across the spectrum of film. It's perhaps the most sustaining project I've ever worked on. But other people answer when I'm talking.
For me, the target audience is, are you breathing? Do you care about the future? You're the target audience. As a con, because in the film there it uses the word inmates in the credits, as this man would tell you, we're cons, we're convicted prisoners, we're not inmates. I was guilty of the crime I committed, so was my friend Sam. So we were in jail, and the beauty of jail is it's full of truth. Because your sentence is on the card. Everybody knows exactly who you are. You watch Big Brother or one of these reality TV shows where the cameras are on all the time. People are living in the house with each other all the time. That's what jail is. But the other beauty about jail is it allows you to look inside yourself, to see where you need to change, if you feel you do, and given opportunities like Caesar gave to myself and Sam, you can change yourself. And that's the only way rehabilitation happens. You change yourself. It's like being an addict. Nobody can get you off the drugs. You have to come off the drugs yourself. Sam.
I got grade 5 CSE English. That meant I only passed an oral exam. I can't spell, I spell thing, F-I-N-G. That's thing to me. And I was a thing. And I was taken on the writing group, and I said, I can't spell, I don't punctuate, I don't even know if I can write a coherent word. Yeah, I wrote nonce inside prison. Nonce is prison slang for a sex offender. And I wrote about a sex offender who raped his common law wife. And I stood up for him in prison. and said a crime is a crime. Because it's a sexual crime, you can't scald him in hot water. You can't stab him or kill him or hurt him. Because he's just like us. He's a con. And I went on to write Two Men in the Trench. Funny enough, Paul, I was looking at that video. I found it at the bottom of a drawer that we made in Edinburgh, 7 minutes of breakfast telly. Both me and Paul talking on there about nuclear, chemical and biological warfare. I was an ex-paratrooper. All my crime came from the army. Because nothing was bolted down, my unit took it with them, including tanks. And we were Royal Engineers. I was a robber. I've done one sentence for robbery. Caesar Project changed my life. I found a way that I could express myself. And I write phonetically. F-I-N-G. That's what I am. A thing.
Great. Any other questions? Yes, sorry.
How did that extraordinary story and that extraordinary way of telling it come together?
Oh, wow, how long you got? How long have we got? You got another 24 years. Very, very briefly, years and years ago, I saw something which said, Julius Caesar was the greatest man in Western history for 2,000 years. That's the way we used to think. But until he was 33, he was a waster, a debtor, a laughingstock, and bisexual. Now, when he was 33, I thought, that doesn't make sense, you know, really. And there was no work out on him at that time, and I started researching it. British Museum let me go in there. I put on a promenade thing at the Edinburgh Festival, which I was very lucky to the last performance. A wonderful historian called Owen Dudley Edwards came and gave it a rave review and nominated it for a first, because he understood the history was the truth. He said so. After I went to film school, which I did go to, believe it or not, looking at that, I wrote to the Home Office and I said, look, I've got this idea for making a film about the life of Julius Caesar. Can I use a prison, please, and prisoners? And nobody was doing drama workshops at all in England, nothing like that. It was 1983. And I thought I'd never hear from them again. 6 months later, I got a letter from the head of education saying, we've considered your idea and we think you should go to Dartmoor because it would be full of the sort of criminal you might like. I'd be quite blunt. I was shitting myself, but I went. And I met Sam and Tone and others, and I really did shit myself. It was a terrifying experience. And it grew from there, really. We wrote, as Sam said and Tone said, 3 scripts inside that prison, a huge amount of other work. We got banned at one stage by the Home Secretary. Douglas Hurd got us put back in. We couldn't raise a penny. In fact, even with wonderful Derek on, and thank you, Sir Derek, I think you're a genius and a great, great human being for what you did for this film. We were offered money to make it, but they put rules on us, like Derek couldn't be nearer than 10 foot to a prisoner. In fact, no actor could, which is nothing like we've got up there. In fact, we couldn't afford makeup, we couldn't afford laundry, we couldn't afford anything by the time we were in Polesmore. And at the end of a week there, fending for himself, Derek, the bed he's sleeping in there, was a prisoner's bed. And I said to Derek and Richard before going, I've got to say, Polesmore is full of TB, full of AIDS, full of everything. And they said, so what? Not our karma to die from those things. Which I thought was quite brilliant. And then at the end of the week, he said, look, my shirt's very dirty. Could we get it washed somehow? And it was just about the most humble thing I've ever seen in my life. So it came together through those. The one Cicero's wonderful group we discovered in there, they were all prisoners. Cicero's a prisoner. And I said, here's the story, guys. Go away, write rap, feed it in there. We'll work with you. Following morning, they came back with that rap song they sing at the funeral. And the guys just put it in there and we all worked together. We spent months and months with brilliant South African actors working to create a group that would play ball with each other. And I think we did.
Any other questions? What was the main difficulty you found in working with the prisoners?
I found none. I find more difficulty
There
in
was
working with
none.
actors now. Why not ask the actors what difficulties they had in working with me? I mean, that's more... Do you mind me asking
Well,
that? Tone, Sam?
When Paul asked me, did I want to get involved in Caesar, I gave him a fortnight. Not because of him, because I'd been in jail for 6 years and I knew how jails worked. I gave him a fortnight, but I thought it'll be a nice DOS for a fortnight. And I'd been writing, I smoked weed all the time in jail. I did 15 and a half years of a life sentence and smoked weed every
It's
day.
illegal.
Huh?
It's illegal.
I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that. But I smoke weed every day. And to earn the weed, I wrote poems and letters and parole reports for people. But the poetry I was writing was shit. I wasn't aware of it because it was the only poetry I knew. It was my poetry. So. But then I became part of Caesar and I learned how to write. And I think I write really good poetry now.
Tone wrote the poem you heard at the beginning, Twice, which I think is beautiful.
But again, going back to what's important, the thing is, we've just recently had the party conference season of the UK politics. And for me, what this film is about is deciding what we want from our governments in regards to prisons. What do you want prisons to be? And remember, the government works for you, not the other way round. The government works for you. How do you want your prisons to be? Use some of the information in here and tell your government that they must do what you want with prisons.
Can I just jump in here very quick, Tone? Because before I went into Dartmoor, I researched it, and it was full of ineducable, stupid, violent men. Tone and Sam were examples of that. It shows you what bullshit we're really fed, actually. I've never met a stupid person, I don't think, actually. And if I can just give you an example to answer your question about how did it happen, what Tone's saying, the education department in the prison actually tried to get rid of us, so they put us into a little cell downstairs. Do you remember? Big enough for one guy to walk around. We ended up with 15, 20 cons in it, like Sam. And I'd studied in Paris with a wonderful man called Lecoq. And I gave him, he has the most brilliant exercises. So I walked into these guys and I said, okay, here's 2 exercises, choose one. One is you're coming down a mountain, you're going through a forest, you go to a beach, you pick up a stone, you throw it into the sea with all your passion. All right? Or, as you are now, walk into a room of your childhood, find something, play with it, and leave the room, as you are now. They're very hard exercises. So I stood there with these like 15 men, waiting. I'll never forget what they both did, and the other men in there. It was utterly brilliant. And I thought, well, no, I never had any difficulty working with prisoners whatsoever.
And Tone and Sam will bear this out, and Richard and Derek as well, that the people we worked with, people were all volunteers. No one came to work with us because they were made to. That they gave with such candour that a space was created that was a space in which anyone could give anything and be safe. And that was absolutely extraordinary. For me, that's what the sheer privilege of acting is about. Exchange on the most naked human level. That's what we all learn by. And as an actor working in a prison, took me back to the absolute basics of what acting was about. I had been acting professionally for 4 years when I went into Dartmoor. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm learning tricks. I'm learning things that I think work. And I'm working with men in Dartmoor who are so naked and so candid and who are giving who they are without preconception. It was the biggest learning lesson for me as an actor.
Can I just say one more thing here? The wonderful Cicely Berry is sitting in there, I've given you things of my skill examples. Cicely Berry is the director of voice of the Royal Shakespeare Company, and her name is legend to any actor on the planet, actually.
In fact, to the children in the favelas in Rio,
Oh, everywhere.
all over the world.
And Cis would come into prisons with me a long time ago, Cis. And many prisons, and we would just go and get prisoners. They wouldn't know they were going to work with Cis Berry. And she would say, let's do a sonnet. Well, here are prisoners who've been dragged from a cell, suddenly doing a sonnet, a very complicated verse form, at 10 o'clock in the morning with Cis Berry. And we've got all this on video. And my God, I mean, by 10:30, what some of those men were doing was extraordinary. Wasn't it, Sis?
Yes, it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
I suppose that because Shakespeare reaches into the depths of human experience, and I think that people in prison have been through so much in their own lives that they can respond to the language of Shakespeare in an extraordinary way, and they just enjoy it so much. And it changed.
And Shakespeare gave us the word nonce, by the way. Totally different context. Totally different context.
Well, it's a head case, I've always thought that. A nonce is a sex case, as Tone said. And in prisons, they're segregated. When I went into Dartmoor prison, there were 2 known nonces who sought voluntary segregation in the E-wing, the punishment wing. They wanted to be alone. Now, we knew, I learned from my group, that there were actually many more nonces, actually, in Dartmoor, because in spite of what Tone said about having your depths there, or your crime, your depths aren't up there, right? Just your crime. So somebody might get away with being a nonce if they will brave it up, right? Yeah. It just depends how tough you are.
But then there's one of the weirdest things in prison is the way we use humour. It's a very, very dark humour. Speaking about one of the secret nonces who wasn't secret too long, a guy who happened to be what do you call him? A necrophiliac.
Oh.
He had been working as an ambulance
Oh,
driver.
no. You can stop.
No, wait. No, this is okay. This is okay, really. This is okay. He used to follow 2 old boys around the exercise yard, about 10 feet behind them. And one day I was walking up the stairs, 4 feet behind him. He was 10 feet behind one of these old boys walking up the stairs. And the old boy turned round and went, "Fuck off, freeborn, I'm still breathing."
And his name was actually Freeborn, actually. I remember him very well.
One question.
Megan had a question.
Yeah.
I'm so sidetracked now. To that.
Megan's got a film on Saturday.
Yes.
Oh.
In the short, she made it for £1,000 and she's flown over from America, and I'm falling over with respect for
We're
her.
all going to come and see it, aren't we?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Well, we talked about the film for quite a bit of time when we first met, and I just wanted to give, I guess, more of a comment more than a question, and then a question to follow up. But I just thought it was so, it was really moving to see how everyone came together to put this project together. And I know we talked about it and just what your overall message was with this, and it definitely did come across to me in so many ways. And the poem in the beginning was brilliant, and particularly the scene where Caesar was speaking to the king. I'm sorry, the names are slipping my mind, but that his speech there, that the line of the monologue was so moving to me, and it's still like replaying in my head. So I just wanted to applaud you guys. It was really, really great, and I really, really enjoyed it. But I wanted to ask, you did share what you gained from it as an actor, but I wanted to know, what did you gain during while filming and then after? What did you?
I've just gained an overwhelming sense of humility. I used to be very conceited. No, just an overwhelming sense of humility, really. I mean, when you're privileged enough to see the tops and, you know, people who are meant to be at the bottom, working together.
Speak louder, sorry.
Both far superior to me in their talents. I felt overwhelmed by the whole thing, really. I gained an enormous amount.
Can I just say one thing, going back to what I was saying before about the drugs, and Paul says it's illegal, don't remember that. But when I was in jail doing my life sentence, there was no drug testing. And the drug that was used in prison by inmates was cannabis. Now there's drug testing. Cannabis stays in the system for a minimum of 28 days. Heroin or cocaine disappears within 3 days. So the people in jail who want to get out of their face are forced by the drug testing to take heroin or cocaine rather than cannabis. So why are we doing this?
But isn't drug testing voluntary?
Well, yeah, unless if you want to be in a cell with no TV,
You're right,
no flask, no radio, no privileges.
Prisons are very complicated universes. They're as bad as ours. And it does get, in all fairness, Tone and Sam, a lot of people off drugs. Didn't you say saved your life?
Yes.
Lots of people get caught into drug cycles, as we know, and prison does clean them up.
And
I
it turns other
weighed
people
8.5
into
stone when they weighed me the first morning I arrived in Oxford Neck on remand for robbery. 8.5 stone I weighed. That's how thin I was. I looked like
Sam's forgetting that he's lost a lot of weight. Sam is King Nicomedes from the film. And Sam has lost a lot of weight, and he's forgetting that he's lost a lot of weight. Because you're not far above 8 stone now, mate.
Just under 9.5 actually.
There you go.
I was 138 pounds as a para, and I'm just about that now.
Guy up here, yeah?
Yeah, I have a question. I actually met Paul and Alice for the first time at a bar in Los Angeles in 1988.
Oh, it's Duncan. I didn't know who it was.
In fact,
Duncan Faulkner is a great action writer, and he's chairing the forum tomorrow.
And they were my guests. And after chatting to Paul and Alice for a while, I had to ask. I said, can you explain to me why you've got a bun on your head? And he said to me, he said, I've got this project which I'm determined to do. And he said, when they told me I couldn't film this project in the prisons, I said to myself, I'm not going to cut my hair until I've done it. So the obvious question is...
I don't really feel I've achieved it yet. The truth is, when I said that, I had hair. Now I'm actually, if I can very quickly, a funny story. I was working with the head of the INS in America, a wonderful bloke called Bill Carroll, and I was given 10 minutes to see him because he was the final, he would let you into America or not. And we got on well with each other. And he's sitting there and he's a tough New Yorker, half Irish, half Italian, very tough New Yorker, actually, indeed. And he said, come have lunch with me. So we go for lunch. And he ended up giving me all his undercover diaries, which were a great film. Anybody's got 20 million to lend me to make a film with Will Carroll. It's a brilliant film, which is written. Halfway through lunch, he said, I'm going to ask you something. I thought, okay, what is it? He said, how'd you do your hair like that? And he said, I promised my wife when we were married I'd never be one of these guys who does this. And he said, every morning I get up and I do this. I want to do that. Anyway, that is a terrible question.
Still waiting for the answer.
On that note, we're going to wrap it up, I'm afraid.
You've been a great audience. Thank you very much.